Have you ever played with a corpse? It happened when I was a little kid, just before when I was about to enter kindergarten. I went to the small valley with my family, grandparents, and my relatives. I was such a brave child as I was too young at the time. Just relying on my little swim tube, I used to play alone deep in the valley water without wearing a life jacket and come out and eat watermelon. My siblings were a little older than me, but being scared, they didn't come in. So I always hid them and then went into the water to tease them. And the adults were sitting on a low wooden bench near the valley just watching us. After eating lunch, I got bored again. I think it was about after 5 or 6. I went back to the water to play alone. Thinking back, it was totally crazy. I was circling about with my hips crammed in a tube carelessly. I was in a situation where I might die right away if the tube flips, but I was just looking up at the sky and thinking that the clouds were pretty at that time. Then, suddenly, the center of my swim tube was shaken a little bit. That was the moment. A girl who looks like a middle school student suddenly grabbed my arm. Her lips looked slightly purple, as if she had been playing in the water for a long time. Then she smiled and said, as if she was reassuring me, "You're gonna fall off. Grab it tightly." She looked kinda older than me, and I was just excited about the thing that she's gonna stay and play with me for a while. So I grabbed the tube and then I swam with her. While she dragged my tube, I couldn't even realize what time it is now. I had so much fun with her. About an hour later, she started to take me to a shallow place near the riverside. "It's going to be cold soon. I'll take you to the adults," she said. But at that moment, my grandmother suddenly screamed and kept shouting my name. She was very old and she didn't even come into the water, but she hurriedly came into the water with her socks on and she lifted me up and then ran out. "Grandma, what's wrong? What happened?" I shouted. But as soon as I came out of the water, my family tried to cover my eyes so I couldn't see the valley. And my grandma was crying while saying that I was possessed by a ghost. I remember going to a temple or shaman's house for a while after that. A few years later, I asked my grandmother what happened that day, and what she told me was a pure shock. The moment my grandmother looked at the valley to see if I was playing well alone, she saw that I was talking to myself while giggling, and something black got stuck at the end of my tube and was wobbling together. Wondering what I was so funny about, she put glasses on to see me and that black thing. And at that moment, she saw that I was swimming around holding someone's black and long hair. Her heart sank. And as she decided to approach me quickly, she then saw the dead body slowly coming up. That's why she ran towards me. Now that I think about it, that memory didn't scare me at all, literally. However, I still can't forget the faces of those adults who saw the scene.
This story is about my grandfather's experience. He died a long time ago. After he was declared dead at the hospital, we took the body home and put it in his room because my grandmother wanted to see him a little more before saying goodbye to her husband. But then, something happened. 2 days later, the room door suddenly opened and my grandfather crawled out asking for water. Literally, my grandmother and all of the aunts just fainted, and only my uncles and my mom were barely awake. And I was just staring at this weird sight because I was too young at the time. I gave my grandfather a whole body massage after I brought him water, and on that day, the house was in chaos. A few months later, I went to my grandparents' house again, and he was so lively that I couldn't believe that he's the one who once died. One day I was sitting with my grandfather eating ice cream, and he started to tell me a story. On that day, my grandfather woke up in the hospital, and he noticed that everyone was crying. He asked them why they were crying, but no one answered, so he was just standing there. And then a man in a black suit called him outside the hospital room. Without time to think, he began following him, and he started to feel a little bit sad rather than scared. The crying sound from behind gradually decreased, and as he walked along with the man, he could see the village where he used to live as a child. There was a river at his feet that he had never seen before, and the river was really, really red. So he got goosebumps. The man was walking on the surface of the water, and he pressed my grandfather to come over quickly. So the moment he tried to follow him, he was also walking on the water. After crossing the river, he then saw a black wooden structure long past the wasteland. When he was about to pass the gate, a woman in black mourning came out from the inside and kicked him out, saying, "No, you brought the wrong person. If you want to live another 3 years of your life, go and ignore everyone you meet. Do not look back. Just follow the four-legged animal." The woman said like this and disappeared into the house with the man. So my grandfather was going back the way he came, and then he saw one of his friends who had died a few years ago standing there. He beckoned him to come closer, but my grandfather ignored him, thinking what the woman had said just before, even if his friend cursed at him. After that, he met other friends, but he ignored all of them and just passed by. The moment he arrived at the river again, there was a bridge that was not there before. At that moment, he saw his daughter, who had died of fever when she was young, standing in front of the bridge. He could not ignore his daughter. So he approached, and she stretched out her hand as if she wanted him to hold it for her. As soon as he was about to hold that hand, something pulled on his legs. When he looked down, he saw a white dog that had been raised by him a long time ago was biting his pants and dragging frantically as if he should not hold that hand. It's like he was telling him to cross the bridge immediately. He stepped back from his daughter quickly, and that was the moment when she suddenly rushed to him. Her mouth almost ripped to the ear, and she repeated like this, "I'm going to catch you. I'm going to take you." She was running toward him with a rope in her hand, and it was horrifying. He started to run toward the bridge, and the dog was barking at the ghost and guarded behind him. As soon as he crossed the bridge, that thing vanished with loud crying, and the dog was still barking as if he was telling him to hurry. He looked back when he was far away from the bridge, and then realized that the river, the bridge, the neighborhood, and the dog were all gone. The surrounding area was as white as a sheet. It was the moment when he finally opened his eyes, and he found himself lying in his bed. Grandfather also told this story to his local friends, and the oldest man told him a story that had been told by a shaman. There's a ghost that brings the dead who met with violent death, and he suggested that the ghost that Grandfather saw seemed to be that kind of type. If ghosts lack a place to live in the afterlife, they would take the dead to build a new house. Anyway, after that, my grandfather lived really well for the rest of the 3 years, as the woman in the dream had said, and then he passed away while taking a nap on the same day he first died, 3 years ago. After that, I kept recalling my grandfather's lonely face while he told me his story at that time. My grandfather was not the type who originally believed in ghosts. While he was alive, he always cut the weeds around the grave and brought some drinks and snacks for the grave's owners whenever he saw the ownerless graves around his town. This, of course, is just my grandfather's very personal experience, so it's okay to think of it as just a novelty story, because he told me exactly the same thing. I guess he absolutely went to heaven, but I just miss my grandfather.